We can use code to generate personalized cards for each one of our friends, family, and customers. To get started, I took a quick shot that I'll use as my photo for my card. I've gone ahead and uploaded it to my Cloudinary account so that inside of my Next.js app, I can use the CldImage component from Next Cloudinary in order to reference it by its ID. And that'll give us our base canvas for the card that we're going to build, where now we can start to think about how we want to construct this into a greeting card that we're going to be able to send around to our friends and family. To start, how about we change the background of this? I don't want it to just be my normal backdrop. So we could easily get rid of the background by adding the remove background prop, where this prop will use the Cloudinary AI background removal add-on, which you have to have enabled in order to make this work. But once the processing is complete, we can see that we remove the background with just a single line of code. Now, to add a new background, I can add an effects array where inside I can specify a background and let's say a color of red, where we can see that was easily added. But I don't think this looks that great. How about we add something a little bit more exciting and a little bit more visually pleasing? I uploaded a few holiday photos, which we can use whatever we want as the background of our image. I really like the peaceful look of this nighttime shot with the holiday trees. So instead of this effects array, I'm going to add an underlay prop, where inside I'm going to specify the ID of that image. And again, we were able to really easily apply a new image as our background with just a little bit of code. But I think I wanted to reposition that image a little bit. Instead of just showing directly in the center, I want to have some more of the sky, the snow, and a little bit more of the top of the trees. So I'm adding a custom configuration to my underlays prop where I'm going to specify that I want the gravity to be north. I want to specify that I want the width to be the full width of the image itself, the parent image. And then in order to make that work, I'm going to add a flag of relative so that the size is relative to the parent. And I definitely think that this is looking a little bit nicer. But now let's take this a step further. What if I want this background to actually be animated and I want this to be snowing? Now this part's a little bit tricky because we need to deal with both video or animated images as well as static images aside from that. Now I found this video on Pexels that I can use for my snow effect in the background. So I have this uploaded to my Cloudinary account, but I can't just simply use a video as an underlay for an image. They're two different file types, so how can I actually merge those together? To do this, in the URL, I'm going to add fauto::animated, which is going to allow me to easily transform this on the fly to an animated image. Now, the first time you do this, it might take a little bit of time to load because it needs to process in the background, but then it'll be served very quickly every time after. But if we now look at the file request that was actually loaded, we can scroll down until we see the content type where we see that it's an image and it's now a WebP image specifically, where it's going to give us the most efficient format for animated images, which in this case is going to be WebP. Now, one thing that I also want to do in addition to this is I want to make sure that this image loops because by default, it'll only play one time. So I'm going to add a new transformation of e_loop. I'm also going to add a transformation of width 720 pixels because I know that I'm not going to use it at a larger size. But once that finishes processing, I can now save this image where I re-uploaded it to my Cloudinary account. Now again, this is where it gets tricky because I can't simply specify this as an underlay because even though they're still both images, my original image is a static image and this is an animated image. So while we can see that the image loads and it works, because the original image was not animated, it will remain a non-animated image. So to fix this, the first thing I'm going to do is simply swap these two different values and make the underlying snow image my source. I also want to get rid of the remove background prop. Now, if we look in the browser, we can see that we get our animated snow now, but we don't see the underlay. It doesn't really make sense to try to remove the background from this or anything. What we want to do now is start to stack our original image on top of this image as the base layer. So instead of making this an underlay, I want this to actually be an overlay, which has a very similar syntax to our custom underlay. But now when I load the image, we can see that it's just me. We don't have our background anymore. Now, one thing to point out is as we're loading these, it might take a little bit for each iteration to load as we're processing a full animated image every time we make a change. But I want to get back that image with my background removed so I can use that as my overlay. So to easily do this, I'm going to clone my CldImage instance. I reverted the source to be that original photo with the background removed, where I can now download that photo, upload it to my Cloudinary account, and use this as my new overlay ID, which now gives me my nice photo with an animated background. And this is looking really cool. But you know what? How cool would it be if I made it look like it was snowing in the background of my image itself? The nice thing about overlays is I can really specify as many as I want here. So I'm going to start off by cloning this overlay, where for this first overlay, I'm going to use the original ID. But I'm not going to stop there. I'm going to add a new property of applied effects, where inside my configuration, I'm going to add multiply true. And now we can see not only do we have that full background, but now we have this nice snow overlay effect on top of it. What's happening here is we're using those two images and using blending modes in order to create that effect. But as we know, no greeting card is complete without a greeting. So this calls for another overlay where I can create my new object. And this time I'm going to define a text property where inside I'm going to configure my text to say Happy Holidays. I think it probably makes sense to make that text white. And for the font family, we can use most of the Google fonts out there, but I like Berkshire Swash. But then let's add a starting font size of, let's say, 120. And we can see that our text appears, but of course it's a little big. So how about let's try 80? And I think instead of it being in the middle, I want to try just making it at the bottom of this card. So I'm going to also define a new property of position where I'm going to say that I want a gravity of south, meaning the positioning will be relative to the bottom of the image. And let's say we want to go 50 pixels up from the bottom of the image. And I already think that's looking pretty magical. But as you can imagine, now that we're tapping into this API, we can do things like creating a drop shadow and maybe even adding a Santa hat, where we have a lot of options for how we compose this and make it as special as we can, including dynamically adding each person's name because we have the ability to use data to populate these fields, or if we wanted to change the backgrounds and text, depending on the time of year. Next up, let's see how we can use AI to extend our images using generative fill in Next.js.